Well, you know, the last 3 to 4 years have been something quite incredible. I don't think any of us could have imagined prior to 2019 anything quite like what we've witnessed over these last 3 to 4 years. From the lockdowns to the pandemic to the mandated vaccines and all the things that have happened since then. And it's like we're living in a science fiction film where these things that we've often watched on television are becoming reality right in front of our eyes. And unfortunately, it's not good. There's everything to be concerned about. When I say that, I don't mean that there's no hope. Of course I don't mean that. But none of the things that we're seeing our national leaders doing are good. And you know, there's a very real reason for all of that. And it's because they don't serve the national interest any longer. And that's become very apparent, you know. In particular, over the course of the last 15 months, where I took it upon myself to start making contacts with people around the world. I've had hundreds and hundreds, 600-700 maybe. In fact, I've lost count of how many it's been. Maybe it's as many as 1,000. I don't know exactly, but I know it's a lot. Many, many meetings, even in a day, 3, 4, 5 meetings a day. And I've been doing this now for a long time. And one thing that's become clear is that other countries, not just the UK itself, but other countries, are going through almost identical problems of their own, the same as we are. And a lot of the problems are being caused by the politicians who are running those respective countries. Here in the UK, we've had the Conservative Party in post now for a long time, and they are really a pale reflection of what the Conservative Party used to be. In fact, they're Conservative in name only now. And even the official opposition, run by Sir Keir Starmer, in the Labour Party within the UK, is not the Labour Party it once was. It's nothing like it. Sir Keir Hardie, a fellow Scot who started the movement in Glasgow back in the day, was also a real pioneer in his day. But even he would consider the modern Labour Party to be unrecognisable. They are so woke, so far to the left, but more than that, they are deeply infiltrated, as are the Conservative Party, by globalism. And it became apparent when I started to talk to other people in other countries, in America, in Canada, in Australia and New Zealand, France, and just through my own studies, but in particular talking to other people from those countries, that the same kind of problems were happening there as well. They would have an official party in power, but they weren't really doing anything to help their own people. But they were very much in lockstep with the globalist movement. We saw leaders coming to power who were former young global leaders in the World Economic Forum. Jacinda Ardern in New Zealand being one who rose to prominence and then to power. We saw the likes of Dan Andrews in the state of Victoria in Australia. We saw other premiers in Australia. We saw Rishi Sunak, who was never actually elected, installed as British Prime Minister after the abject failure of his predecessor. And we've seen the same things happening in Canada with the Trudeau regime. Once again, all these people were young global leaders, handpicked and chosen by none other than Klaus Schwab and his close associates. And they were picked and installed for a reason, because they would do his bidding. And a lot of people thought that he was just a conspiracy theorist. I mean, I didn't take him too seriously prior to 2019, and I've been in business a long time. Business clubs are not unusual, and I've belonged to many. But the thing is, what was unusual about the World Economic Forum was that they had an agenda. And they enticed and attracted a lot of people into joining who thought that they were going to make good contacts. And of course they did. Like most business clubs, That's really what you join for. It's who you might meet, who you might be introduced to. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. But there was something else about the World Economic Forum that most of the members didn't know. And that was their plans for the future. And of course, we started to see a lot of talk of digital ID, where cash is going to be outlawed and got rid of. And then we've heard about central bank digital currencies. And then we've heard about 15-minute smart cities. Now, these things sound okay to start with, but they're not, because ultimately it takes away the freedom and the privacy and the control from the individual and hands it directly to state control. In China, communist China, they have what's called the social credit score. And the social credit score is designed to get people to obey the state. That's really it. There is no other purpose for it. And they have introduced a lot of technology into supermarkets and public transport, taxis, planes, airports, buses. And if you don't have the correct social credit score, then you will be denied entry to those places. Now that's coming to the Western world as well. And in Australia, they've just passed laws to introduce digital ID there. Australia and New Zealand, for the last number of years, have been deeply infiltrated by globalists. But we all have been. And in fact, our nations have been captured in a bloodless coup d'etat. We didn't realise that there was a creeping globalisation coming in. And they didn't just infiltrate our governments, but they infiltrated our parliaments and indeed our institutions, from health and education to military and the police, including our national security services. They've all been infiltrated by globalists. That's not to say that all of those institutions are completely corrupt or that everybody who works them is bad, but it does mean that the globalists have a huge amount of sway. And the direction that they're taking us is down a very dark dystopian path. One where the freedoms of the past that we've all taken for granted and enjoyed as citizens of a free world are now under serious threat. When I founded Freedom Train International, which is a freedom movement, freedom of thought, freedom of speech, freedom of movement, it was done because I believe, as I still do, that there is a serious threat to our respective freedoms in our respective countries. And it's for that reason that I encourage every single one of you to get on board with Freedom Train International. We are about to go to member-only content. And the reason that we're going to do that is because if we are completely public-facing, the globalists can attack us. Why would they do that? Well, at their last meeting in Davos, their primary mission wasn't on stopping world war, curing cancer, or world hunger. No, it was on disinformation and misinformation. Once again, that sounds fine until you peel it back and you realise that what they're really saying is that they don't like people not agreeing with them. A free and independent media no longer exists. The lying legacy mainstream media have either been bought off, corrupted or blackmailed to such an extent that they will not report the truth any longer. And so the globalists at Davos decided they were going to introduce disinformation and misinformation laws. Now, some people have said they don't have the power to introduce any kind of policies or laws in governments. They're not elected. Well, that's all very true. They're not elected and they don't have the power to pass laws in our respective countries. But when their members comprise Rishi Sunak, British Prime Minister, Canadian Prime Minister, American presidents, and other leaders, then in our respective countries, then yes, of course, they can pass those laws. If Klaus Schwab calls up Joe Biden and says, I want you to introduce this particular policy, Joe Biden will do as he's told. Or perhaps it's Obama that will tell him. But you know what I mean. And it's the same in every country. But there's something that's about to happen. And it's been happening, but it's gathering pace. And you've heard about this before. But mass uncontrolled illegal immigration is exactly that. It's uncontrolled, it's massive in scope and scale, and it's illegal. So why are our respective countries like France and the Netherlands and the UK and America and Canada, Australia and New Zealand, all finding vast numbers of illegal migrants coming into their countries? It's not by chance. Anybody that thinks it's just coincidence is very wrong indeed, and you need to wake up fast. The reason is that it causes great burden on those respective countries. I mean, just today in the UK, there was another 350 migrants came across the channel. That was just in one day. That's actually quite a small number compared to what it usually is. There's been as many as 1,000 in a day. If you do that every day for a year, year in, year out, you're talking hundreds of thousands of people coming onto the shores of the UK. But it's happening in all of our other respective countries too. Why is our government housing such vast numbers of people who are here illegally in 4-star and 5-star hotels? Paying them, giving them mobile phones, treating them with free healthcare. In this country, we have the National Health Service. But in other countries, they're getting freebies as well. And they keep coming. They're not coming because they love our respective countries or our traditions. They're not coming because they like us. They're coming because they can get free stuff and they're being allowed to do so. But there might be another agenda at work here as well. Most of these people, in fact, I would say about 98 to 99% of them are young men. Young fighting age men. They're not old men. They're not young teenagers. They are 25, 35 age bracket, thereabouts. So why are our respective governments doing this? Do they not know the burden that it's putting on the taxpayers in our respective countries? Of course they do. Do you think they care? They don't care. They don't care because they're globalists. They have infiltrated those high offices, like our British Prime Minister. They are corrupt, in my opinion. They are dishonest, and they will lie to your face quite easily. And they're handpicked because they talk a good game, but they're capable of telling lies, and there's not a lot of leadership in them. They're not really leaders in their own right. And Justin Trudeau is a really good example of that. He's a weak, cowardly, and effeminate man who would run away rather than face up to an angry crowd, as we've witnessed during the protests with the Freedom Convoy movement, who are protesting peacefully against vaccine mandates in Canada. And he tried to get the military in Canada to turn on his own people. What kind of a national leader tries to turn his soldiers on his own population? And Canada got brutalised. So did Australia. In particular, the state of Victoria under Dan Andrews, who is now working for the World Economic Forum directly as an ambassador, I believe. And then there's Ireland. You know, I went to Ireland about 2 months ago, and I went to the south. I was in Limerick, I was in Dublin, and many different places in between. And I met a lot of very good people there. And you know, I love the Irish. I'm a Scottish Highlander with a bit of Norwegian Viking blood in me, going way back into the distant realms of time. But you know, the Scottish people, in particular the Scottish Highlanders, have never crossed swords with our Irish brothers and sisters. We just haven't. That doesn't mean there hasn't been the odd quarrel. I'm sure there has. But nation against nation, people against people, no, never. Any more than there was a problem with the Welsh, who are also part of our Celtic heritage here in these British Isles. So I got a very warm welcome in Ireland, but I was deeply saddened and troubled to see the things that had been going on. And my visit there was not long after the visit, after the little girls were stabbed by an illegal migrant. But I was taken to communities, small communities, where there might be maybe 1,000 people, but the local hotel has agreed to house maybe 400, 500, 600 illegal migrants. Do you have any idea what that's like to these people living there? I know it's bad in England. I know Wales have had their share, and Scotland, of trouble as well. But the levels of illegal migration into Ireland, quite frankly, is off the charts. They're not a big population. They're about 5 million people. And I think their population has almost doubled within the last few short years. They voted not to join the EU, and then they were made to vote again and again and again until the EU got the result that they wanted. The EU just happens to be one of the most undemocratic, dictatorial entities there is, which is why I fought against them and fought for British independence with the Brexit Party. And I'm deeply concerned about what's happening in Ireland. I visited Roscrea and many other communities that have had many people there protesting. Now these are men, women and children. They're not far right, as RT in Ireland and the lying mainstream media like to make out. They're just concerned people, seeing their country being systematically destroyed and torn apart by vast amounts of illegal migrants. Why would the Irish authorities allow this? Well, they are infiltrated by globalists. So why are the globalists so hell-bent on destroying national sovereign identity? Well, globalists want a one-world global order that they control. They want to effectively do away with democracy, voting, and parliaments. They want to govern everything. And that's why they're introducing these types of legislation, to stop people speaking out about it. That's why Freedom Train International is going to member-only content soon. So it's basically a private organisation that our members can come in and take part and learn from us and get prepared. And it's very, very important that you do. Because even in the remainder of 2024, we are going to see and witness unprecedented things happening. Now, I don't have a crystal ball. I can't see into the future any more than anybody else can. But I can see the trends. And I can see that war is on the horizon. The British, or I should say the British government, are poking the bear with Vladimir Putin in Russia. They are consistently trying to keep the war in Ukraine going with vast sums of money, funneling money over there to one of the most corrupt regimes there is in existence. Ukrainian politicians driving around in Ferraris and sports cars with luxury mansions, all at the British, Canadian, American and European taxpayers' expense. It's off the charts. And with what some predict as being 600,000 dead Ukrainian servicemen, with the count going up on the daily basis, it's a tragedy. Many of these Ukrainian servicemen and women have fought bravely. They were never the problem. It was the corrupt regime that was. Once again, Zelensky, another globalist parasite infiltrator, parading himself around in a charade that he likes Ukraine and that he loves Ukraine. He doesn't, but he does love the money that you give him. So we are seeing a real pushback starting to happen. And this mass illegal immigration that's taking place is by design. Because as I said, the globalists don't want any strong national identity because that stands in their way. So they will use mass numbers of migrants to flood a community, destroy its sense of community, and force those local people out and essentially take over those communities. Now, Ireland is a beautiful country. It's had its share of troubles in the past, as every country has on these British Isles in particular. We've all fought each other at some point in the past, whether it was invading Vikings in the Northern Isles, whether it was Scottish Highlanders kicking them out. It happened. There was back and forth all the time. And as a Scottish Highlander, my ancestors were part of the clan system. When they weren't fighting the English, they were fighting each other. They were always fighting. The Irish were very similar. But I say that looking back in history, we must never forget our history. But the Irish and the Scots, the Welsh and the English are good people. And we mustn't forget our history. But we need to understand that we have a common enemy. The common enemy are the globalists. They don't care one bit for the Irish or the Scots, the English or the Welsh, the French, the Norwegians, the Americans or the Canadians, or anybody else. They only care about themselves. And many of you who watch this channel will also know that I interview professors, scientists, top doctors from all over the world. And I've come to the conclusion that what the globalists have done, because they all worked in lockstep together when they introduced the mandates, they knew what they were doing. The patents go back to before the pandemic was even declared. This was planned. And unfortunately, when you got people like Bill Gates involved, who has openly talked about wiping out large numbers of the population and reducing the population to very low levels, we should be paying attention because he means it. He is part of a eugenics program. He believes in the darker side of eugenics, which is population reduction, as does Professor Dennis Meadows. He's another professor who believes. There's a lot of them. Our former Prime Minister Boris Johnson's father, Stanley Johnson, another proponent of eugenics. But the funny thing is, they're never the ones that are volunteering to off themselves. It's always other people. And what better way to do it than to put a needle into everybody's arms, as many as they could. Excess deaths are off the charts. Turbo cancers, early onset cancers are off the charts, along with myocarditis, pericarditis. And let's face it, 14-year-olds having heart attacks is not normal. Fit athletes dying on the fields and the track is not normal. Television presenters suddenly keeling over and dying is not normal. The globalists knew what they were doing. Make no mistake about it. Not every member of the WEF is evil. Those at the lower tiers probably weren't, but those at the higher levels certainly would have been. And they had their own people in post and in place, and they still do. I would like to think that we could vote them out, but I'm not so sure, especially after the Trump election that took place with Joe Biden. I don't see how Joe Biden could have had more votes than Obama. Obama could string a sentence together. Joe Biden can barely tie his shoelaces. So at the end of the day, we can only but hope that there will be a fair and free election in the United States of America, because I have it on good account from people who have met these globalists that one of the biggest things they fear is another Trump presidency. So let's hope that Donald Trump does get re-elected. Is he perfect? No. None of us are. But if the globalists don't want Trump to get elected, then I do. I want whatever the globalists don't want. What about you? So, when I look at what's going on in Ireland, just going back to that for one moment, for all the people in America and Canada and all around the world who have Irish connections, think and look and watch. We're seeing communities devastated. I just posted up something quite recently about Dublin. Dublin, the capital of Ireland, is being decimated with vast, huge numbers of illegal migrants who are violent, they're stabbing children, they're raping women, and they're running amok. Crime is at an all-time high. And these poor Irish people, I think they've been through enough in history. They don't need this. So you need to think about that. And I think that Ireland is where it's at. If I'm being honest, I think that we all have problems with migrants in our respective countries through the globalisation of our borders, We can argue that we don't even have borders any longer. But Ireland is where the battlefield is. That's where the battleground is. And I think I'll be heading back to Ireland in the not too distant future. Because I love the Irish people. They are our kindred spirits. And what they're going through is awful. And the people around the world need to watch Ireland closely. Because what's been done to Ireland is coming to your country next. It already is. But they started to expropriate farms in the Netherlands. You know this. You've seen my channel. You've heard me speak about this many times. And I was in the Netherlands just a few weeks ago talking to Dutch farmers and freedom fighters there, with a large contingent of people from Canada, America, the UK and Australia. But they're also talking about expropriating people's houses here in the UK for asylum seekers. And the elderly that might live in a large house, maybe they've worked hard all their lives, maybe got a 4 or a 5 bedroom house. If they're widowed and they're there on their own, well, they might have to give those houses up for migrants and asylum seekers. It's absolutely true. It's already starting to happen. Do your research. Is this the face of the future? Is this what we're facing now? I would say to the Irish people, it's time to rise up. It's time to stand up and take your country back. Vote them out if you can. But you're going to have to think of alternative ways if not. Mass non-compliance, mass protests. Take to the streets peacefully, non-violently. Don't give the Garda any excuse, like the Canadian authorities, RCMP, and those in Victoria, Australia. They're only too happy to brutalise and beat young women and children and teenagers and tear gas them at the slightest provocation. So keep it peaceful. But you have to be strong. The world is watching Ireland right now, as am I. And I hope for the sake of free peoples all over the world that you will help me to unite these countries. The patriots in the Netherlands, the patriots in France, the patriots in Germany, many, many people from all around the world have joined Freedom Train International. We're more than just a freedom movement. We are the new resistance. And it's time to resist. Join us and fight for your families and your communities, wherever they are, and stand shoulder to shoulder with patriots wherever you find them. English patriots should be cheering on the Irish patriots, and the Irish patriots should accept the help and the assistance of everybody around the world. I'm not saying that we should forget old squabbles and old troubles and old conflicts. We never forget our history. As a Scottish Highlander whose ancestors were burnt out their homes at the point of a sword by the English, we don't forget. But I have many English friends. We move on. And the common enemy are indeed the globalists. And we must stand united together. This is Jim Ferguson. We'll speak soon. Bye-bye.